I'm Sanjay Mohe from Bangalore. We are going to talk about the ways of seeing. This is in response to the statement by Edward Said, which says the Orient, the East, still continues to visit the past, present, and the future through the imperialist or colonial lens. I do agree with this statement, and I'll start with myself. And when I was in a college, I actually studied in Marathi medium. And when I started studying architecture, had to express everything through English language. And the language was given more importance than the ideas. And that became a kind of hindrance. It kind of sets you back. And it took me about 2-3 years to sort of, come to terms with this whole thing. And I think each one of us go through this whole process. And in the way, you somehow tend to lose your confidence, and you have to really fight back to get that. And this is a process that we are talking about. Actually, we have such a rich heritage, and just talking about the languages, we have so many languages. And imagine developing each language would have taken hundreds of years to get every emotion into that language, every mood into that language. And then we just discard it and start, looking down upon it, and which is something which is very sad. So just to get it back, I'm just trying to put together some of these ideas about what this whole idea of our culture is about. So we have specific colors, we have specific music, we have specific smells, and this whole country has so much variation in terms of settings, that we have snow-clad mountains and regions in one end, and we have deserts, we have forests, and then these rolling plains. And architecture of each of these places differs. It has a response to the climate. And just to put it short, if you look at climate of Rajasthan, which has surrounded by desert, you end up building houses which are very close to each other. Each house becomes an insulation for each neighboring house becomes an insulation for your house, exposing least amount of surface exposed to the sun, as against Kerala, which is hot and humid climate, where you need to have a breeze onto your body. And so you have houses which are placed away from each other, creating a lot of spaces in between. So we are talking about porosity of the form. And this Indian charpai, as we call it, is probably the best example, because it breathes. When you sleep on it, you have a breeze coming from all around, and it's perfectly designed for our climate. And we went to Cambodia and saw some of these houses, which actually symbolizes exactly the same Indian charpai. And if you see the floor, you have a possibility of breeze coming through the floor. So you are surrounded by the breeze, and this is probably the best example of porosity. So in our work, we try to take a form, take a cube, start perforating it, allowing the breeze to go through it. And then you connect it with outside, and that outside could be just the front yard, or it might be 1 kilometer away from you. So it's about the transition between indoor and outdoor, which is possible in our climate. So we have this amazing advantage of blurring the boundaries between inside and outside, and use that stretch of space to advantage. And Shantiniketan, Rabindranath Tagore's place is one of these best examples, where these, I would look at them as probably the ideal classrooms. And whenever I think about designing a classroom, this is the image which comes to my mind. You have these places under the tree where you sit and communicate. So the equivalent of that tree in the courtyard is a pavilion. So you generate shade, you allow the breeze to come onto your body. So how do you really use that idea of a pavilion? And when we wanted to make the school, and the idea of a classroom which came first as a pavilion, as a single pavilion, but it was not possible to put so many of pavilions, so many of classrooms. So the next step was to put two of them and then surround the pavilion with three sides greenery. That also became little too large. So finally, the third option was to create the pavilion with greenery on either side, and create that, and then assemble the entire plan based on that idea. So this is how the classroom began. It's like it has windows on either side. You can open them, and it does become like a pavilion with courtyards on both the sides. So you have a possibility of holding a class within this place, or you have a possibility of conducting a class within the courtyard, or you move out and have a class under the classroom, under the tree. So it just gives you various options of exploiting that outdoor space. And it's not only about the classroom, but it's about these in-between spaces between the classrooms, where you have a courtyard which are designed for a specific age group, surrounded by verandas. And it is again very similar to our traditional house, where we exploit different privacies, the hierarchy of privacy, where you have a road, then you have a doorstep in front where you communicate with outsiders. Then you have an internal courtyard where you communicate with the sky and cosmos, almost surrounded by verandas, where you have this a multifunctional space where you have the different quality of privacy required, and then you have an enclosed room. So you get a complete option between the open and a closed space. You have semi-open and semi-closed spaces. And that's what you try to sort of exploit in this section. So you have these various options possible across the entire spine. So this is how the classroom looks like. You have these semi-outdoor spaces and these courtyards surrounded by verandas. And we keep doing it in almost every project, where this is one of the libraries which we did long back. So idea was to create an enclosure around these large trees, and you give option to a student. Either you sit inside and study, you sit under a tree or study, or you sit, there is this kund-like thing with a water and the steps around, or you put your feet into the water and study. So it just gives you these various options of exploiting open to sky space. And these are the works of masters. This is Korea's work, this is Doshi's work, and this is Jeffrey Bauer's work. And if I ask what is common between these three slides, it's very difficult to decide what is indoor and what is outdoor. This is like a threshold kind of space which can become outdoor space, or it can become indoor space. And this is what we try to exploit in almost every project. So you take a cube and you create that porosity and allow nature to grow within that, allow breeze to go through, allow light to come in. And then you create a space like this. This is Karunashriya Hospice. This is a college in Trichy, Care College, where again built around this water. And this is how we learned through the traditional houses. These are some of the traditional houses where you have these courtyards and verandas. So whether it's a smaller house or it's a mosque surrounded by colonnades, the idea is same. Create these kind of a semi-covered, semi-open spaces and allow the nature to sort of take its form. So we are talking about senses and the feel of the spaces. It's not only about how it looks, but how it feels. And that's what we always look at. And one of the probably best examples is South Indian temple, which has series of courtyards, layers, one layer, second layer, third layer, fourth layer, till you come to the sanctorium, which is actually the smallest and the darkest kind of a space. So there's the entire transition which happens from outdoor, the main road, you go through one layer, second layer, third layer. And this is the first layer where it is much more brighter. There's a larger space. You go from that to the second layer where the light quality changes. It becomes slightly more controlled light. The volume changes, the temperature changes. It becomes even further darker as you go in. Again, it becomes cooler. Further inside, it becomes even more cooler because the density of the structure surrounded by these large stone walls. And eventually you end up into this dark space, which is a symbol of infinite space. So it's the smallest, but symbolically the infinite space with just one small lamp, where you actually pray and concentrate. So you have this amazing transition which happens from outdoor to indoor. And it's not only you are seeing a change of light. Everything changes when, first of all, you remove your shoes and touch Mother Earth and you sensitize your skin. You offer flowers and you sensitize your nose. You light a lamp, you sensitize your eyes. You have tirtha, you prasad, whatever. You sensitize uh, uh, your tongue, and then you ring bells and you sensitize your ears. So it's like an entire expression. And this is what you see in most of these ceremonies and our festivals and festivities, which happens in every religion. So there is this whole excitement and what the celebration of sound, smell, touch, taste, everything. So if you really map it on the scale of white to black, you find the shades of grays where you see the transition happening from open to close, bright to dark, noisy to quiet, warm to cool, porous to dense, impurity to purity. And this is what almost every religion sort of exploits, that because you are talking about senses, you are trying to come closer to divine. So it's talking about the light again. You sort of give importance to the ray of light coming into the space. But unfortunately, most of our cities are becoming transparent. Most of our working places are becoming transparent, and they are becoming more and more reflective. And in that process, this ray of light, which I've been talking about, is losing its presence. And the whole idea is, how do you preserve it? How you make its presence felt and work around it to create moods, emotions, connect the whole ambience with emotions. Again, coming back to the temple, and I'm talking about the simplicity of expression, simplicity of structure. What is this whole space is about? It's just series of colonnades. It's like I would call it as a super veranda, but it's just a grid of columns and play of platforms and the play of light. So if you look at it, it's a grid superimposed with series of platforms, creating some spaces to move around, and a play of volumes and allowing that light to come in. And it's such a simple expression. There is such a strong order to it. That actually you feel it is almost like Indian classical music. You don't need a huge orchestra to play. What you need is just 3 instruments and an amazing quality of voice, and it can transcend you into something different world altogether. And that's the power of that simplicity, which you see it in some of these compositions. In the tropics, we are talking about shade. We are always in search of shade. Whether you look at animals or you look at people, we are always in search of shade, and we try to find ways of creating shades. Whether it's a marketplace, whether you use different materials, but the whole idea is to create that shade and create that comfort zone. And again, as I was talking about earlier about pavilions, I mean, what these pavilions do is they create shade and allow the breeze to come in. If you look at Rajasthan, this is in Jaisalmer, where you have these tall walls and the roof, and the whole idea of building these tall walls is to create a shade. It does create an enclosure, it does create a feeling of a court at a roof level, but at the same time, these high walls, they create a shade, and it sort of keeps the temperature down. And this is a perfect example, jackfruit. It's how it creates shade, because the fruit inside is so delicate that it can get spoiled and fermented if that strong sun falls onto it. So what these pokey little things do is they create a shade on the surface. and thereby it keeps the content, the fruit, cool, and hence doesn't get fermented. And the same idea, you find it in Rajasthan. What these carvings do is the same thing. They are creating shade, and that's why if you go and touch the wall from inside, it, even if it is 45 degrees outside, that wall inside would be extremely cool. And this is the skill of the designer to create shade onto the, and we are creating these small narrow lanes. What again, this is in Jodhpur, where you see the shaded streets, or in Jaisalmer. These are some of the famous pictures which you keep seeing. And that even when it is 45, 48 degrees outside, these spaces below has, amazing quality of, it's very, very comfortable, and you feel the breeze onto your body. Same thing is done in this Bombay DN Road, where this is again a colonial work during British time. They created these colonnades all along the roads. And this was a win-win situation where the builder can build on the top of the colonnade and exploit that additional built-up area. But in turn, you give this space to the people, and this belongs to everyone, and people get advantage of walking under a shade. And the same thing we start sort of exploiting in our projects, where we try to create that shade in various forms. This is one of the early projects what we had done for, this is one of these affordable segment of housing, very, very compact houses. But we created this street, which almost is symbolic of, the village streets, whatever the images I showed you earlier, with series of gateways. So you walk from one court to another with gateways spanning across, and some of these tilted forms creating dynamism into the whole street. And this is how it looks like as you see these gateways, something similar to what you see in Jaisalmer. And it does allow that, breeze to come in and create shaded streets. The climate has been one of the most constants over millions and millions of years. And that's what really dictated our way of life. That's what has really made us create certain customs, certain rituals and all. And one of the normal things what we do in India is traditionally you remove your shoes before you enter a house. And the reason why we do it, because we sit on the floor and eat. And why we sat on the floor and ate? Because the floor allowed us to sit on the floor. Now, this cannot happen in a Western country where the temperature goes to -10, -15. So floors are extremely cold and you cannot sit on the floors. You have to wear shoes. And the chair was invented as an insulation against the cold floor. So, so we sort of blindly followed using that chair. But if you look at our traditional houses, the window started from the floor level because you sat on the floor and you wanted the breeze to come onto your body. So the windows started from the floor level. But unfortunately, over the time, we accepted chair as part of our way of life. And then slowly we accepted the windowsill height to be 900, 1 meter, whatever. So without questioning enough, we have been changing ourselves. We have not been asking enough questions. Now, this is one restaurant in Ahmedabad where typically when you sit on the floor, to make that sitting posture comfortable, they give these two supports under your knees. And I have experienced this. And when you sit on the floor and when you support your knees with this small device, it's an extremely comfortable position. So before accepting that chair, can we look at these kind of devices and then, because probably it is much more healthier to sit in this position, and because your body becomes much more flexible. This is something which our forefathers did for millions of years. And why are we really accepting that chair as part of our life? Now, this is an Amazon forest where some of these tribals, this is their sitting posture, and they would use this kind of one support to make their sitting posture on the ground comfortable. And some of the designers developed that as a same, taking that idea to the next level and creating that band, and then they packaged it and sold it like a device which you use it for sitting on a floor. So what is required is to develop, to have sensitivity to understand our way of life, and then try to find ways of making that comfortable. Now we have this amazing way of eating with hand. But whenever I go to even Indian restaurant, even today, and if I have to eat with hand and not with fork and spoon, I get little conscious, and I wonder why. Because if this is part of our system, why are we so conscious about it? Why can't we have self-confidence to say that, okay, I'll eat with my hands because all my forefathers did that. And it's a skill which only we know how to do it, how to lift that rice with a hand and put it in a mouth, which most of the Westerners can't do it. And because of that skill of using fingers effectively, also the chopsticks, which probably is used in some of the countries where I think your hands, the fingers become much more supple, much more sensitive. And that's why you see much more craftsmanship happening in our country as well as in China. You see so much of a craftsmanship, and somehow you feel that it is something to do with, from the childhood, how to make use of fingers in a most sensitive way. It's also about the clothing and the relationship with the shelter, because clothing is the first form of shelter and the house becomes the second form of shelter. So there is a strong connection between the way you dress and the way house works. So in the Rajasthan, you see these huge turbans. They are like insulation against the heat. You have 45 degrees outside, so you need to protect your head with this kind of insulation. And when you see the house form, you see that insulation on the top of the form. Now in Kerala, where it is a hot, humid climate, you want to have a breeze onto your body. So you would wear least amount of clothing, and architecture also does the same. You have these kind of verandas where you spend most of your time, and it's about the porosity. And again, as a response to the climate, when you go to Rajasthan, you have more inward courtyards because you don't want that hot breeze to come inside. Response to the surroundings, you are in Rajasthan, you are surrounded by brown color desert all around, and then you see suddenly this whole explosion of colors and celebration of colors. In Kerala, you are surrounded by so much color, there's so much greenery all around. So if you want to make a statement, you have to wear white color. So you will find most of the people wearing white. So there is a strong relationship with your surroundings, your the way the entire nature sort of plays a role around you. But in Bhutan, it is taken to the next level. Now, if you see Bhutanese architecture, these are some of the religious places. These are some of the housing, and this is some of the commercial places. And there is so much similarity between the three. There are three different types, but in a subtle way, it shows that it is different, yet belongs to one. So when you see any of these settings in a village, you will see a religious place, you will see commercial place, you'll see housing, but there is a strong connection between all three of them. And that connection follows onto the clothing also. And when you see the clothing and when you see the architecture, there is a strong connection. You see the continuation of the clothing happening onto the door frame, onto the architectural facade as well. And actually they become part of the architecture. So where the clothing stops, where architecture begins, and you move from one to another, and there is such a strong connection across that. There is absolute synergy across the way the spaces get used, the way people move in and out of those spaces. And again, there is one other aspect of it, that you see these white walls, predominant white walls in some of some of these temples, and you go inside and you suddenly see so much of color happening, and you have these colors, but you see this predominant white walls. But when you go inside, you're walking through a three-dimensional painting. You become part of the painting, and that's amazing how you control that colors and white walls, and that's something which is extremely amazing. um, as a nation, as a country, we have less resources, more people, and that's the reason you need to look at multifunctionality. And that multifunctionality leads you to something what I would call it as an ambiguous kind of a use of space against a well-defined use of space. I'll just explain that point. This is about multifunctionality. So you have a staircase, this might be only about 5 feet, but you would still have a shop happening under that. Most of these cricket matches, most of us grew up like that. There would be about 4 cricket matches happening on the ground, but absolutely there is no confusion. You know exactly where your players are, who is bowling to you, and if some other ball from other team comes in, you respect that as well. So there is some kind of a order within the chaos. For a Westerner, this would look like a total chaotic situation, but for us, there is a hidden order within that, and only we know about it, and there is a value to it. I mean, we have to know the value of this and preserve this. The way our clothing is, this is the art of folding a cloth. It's not about art of stitching, but art of folding. And that also gives you multifunctionality, because you can spread it on the floor and sleep on it. You can tie it on your head and it becomes a turban. So it gives you so many options. You can tie vegetables into it and use it like like a basket and bring it. And same thing happens in this picture as well. The way we eat a traditional, what do you call it, our normal food, each helping that you do is you keep mixing what you want to it, and you change the taste of the each helping. So it never tastes the same. You, as per what you like, you keep mixing it and generating it. So it's ambiguity against something which is fixed. So we don't have in a traditional house, there is a sense of ambiguity or multifunctionality. We don't have a fixed living room, fixed dining room, fixed kitchen. The same space, which is like a courtyard surrounded by a colonnade, it becomes a sitting place for informal interaction. Same thing can become a place where you eat, and when you have like a wedding happening, the same court gets covered with the shamiana and the whole ambience changes. And this is how the same space looks like, which is absolutely amazing. And this is what the whole culture is about. It's about sitting on the floor, sitting on the celebrating smell of these flowers, celebrating the light and the whole ambience. And this is what we try to do in every project, where a space is not considered as a static space, a fixed space. It develops generates different activities, absorb different activities. So the space which looks like this on a normal day becomes like this when there are functions. This happens in the Titan corporate office. This is a Care College School. So normally you have a lake next to it, and this water body comes within the courtyard. But the same thing becomes a celebration space when it comes to any of these gatherings. This is one of the research labs where normally this is just an entrance code, but you have a possibility of converting the same space for these large gatherings where there's a music program happening. Same situation again, the same courtyard, which is a shaded space, becomes a gathering space. This is one of the scientists giving a talk. In a school, what I showed earlier, the Srinidhi International School, some of these things happen by accident as well. So we never thought when we designed, when we had these trips, it would be used for for these kind of a sport or for these kind of celebrations. So it's about creating that multifunctionality. Our culture is more about absorption. It's not about elimination. Though as an architect, we talk so much about minimalism, we try to remove things, but typically that's more a Japanese culture about minimalism, where you have these minimal, just the tatami mats. And this is how Tadawando's works looks like, which is absolutely minimal. But for us, it's about absorption. It's about so many things happening. It's about even the traffic moving. It's very similar to that playground I showed. It's about so many functions happening, and uh, only we know how to operate within this comfortably. For outsiders, this is total chaos. And finally, we become part of the background and become one with the whole setting. So when it comes to a house, this is one of the houses which we designed long back, and we call house as a collection of memories. And we say that every memory has to have a place within the house. So we imagine it to be much more with lesser artifacts, and slowly those artifacts started growing, and eventually it became like this. But for the person who is owner of the house, each of these artifacts is a memory. Each of this object tells a story to them. So as an architect, you have no right to say, okay, get rid of all that. And so you have to respect these things. If something reminds somebody of some color reminds him of something, it is it's up to them. And as an architect, you have no right to sort of infringe onto that. Our culture is about energy. This is a typical cricket ground against what you see in Wimbledon, where there's so much of order. So there is energy against order, and again it sort of talks about the same point what I was mentioning earlier. Ours is a very ritualistic society. There are so many rituals which are part of our life, and there's nothing wrong into it. So, and this is something which I had seen it about 10 years back. This is the temple in Thrissur, and there's one small intervention. There is one triangle which one of this old master builder would have made, which frames this kalasha, which is actually that one of those points. So when you do this production all around, you get a glimpse of this, which is that, and people would stand there and pray at that, and how much that one triangular opening has done to it, it's quite amazing. So people stand there, look at it, and then over the time you realize that there's a ritual which has started, that people start putting a stone there and pray to that, and as a connection to that kalasha. So ours is a ritualistic society, and you have to create a place for it. And Korea talks about ritualistic path. And this is what you sort of try to see, the spaces between the structure, rather than not just within the structure, but between the structure. And that's what we try to do in every project. We try to create this kind of a ritualistic path. So this is happening in that Srinidhi school, which I showed you earlier. So you have this path which is happening between this one part of the school, between the active zone and more energetic zone, and you have a lot of functions happening in between. And this is how it looks like. We are traditionally, our ancestors had been masters in controlling the light. They knew how to bring light into the space, how to control it through these jalis. It's like a transparency and a space which breathes, not like a glass which doesn't breathe. And then you have these chatais. And in a hot climate of Rajasthan, you know how to reflect the light off these blank walls and protect the cool inside. But in Kerala, you tend to reflect the light off the ground and bring it into the space. Hence, the roofs come very close to the ground, and you get the reflected light into the space. And when you have a light, it really changes the mood. It sort of brings this light into the space and creates so many different qualities, which is quite amazing. And that's what we try to do in this campus in Titan, is where you see this reflected light onto the onto the roof, and the whole ambience changes. Once you have that kind of light, the feel is totally different. It's also about creating shade, darkness around the light. And that, because in the tropics, we get a sun from the top. It's not like in the West where the sun is more horizontal. You get this sequence of light and shade, light and shade. This is the sun what you typically see in the Northern Hemisphere, more in Europe, where you see these horizontal shadows, whereas in our country, we get these vertical shadows. And that's what you try to exploit by creating that shade and light, shade and light. And we try to do that. So if you look at this, we try to create that sequence where you have a shade, you have a light, you have a shade, you have a light, you have a shade, you have a light. And to create that sequence, you have to develop this entire sequence where you create a shade, you bring in the light. So if I see here, this is in shade, this is in light, this is in shade, this is in light. Again, you have a darkness here, you have a light here. So this is how the entire sequence moves. The gray is where the light doesn't fall, the yellow is where the light falls, and hence you get this, the entire sequence. And this is what you see in most of the traditional structures. Korea talks about transfer and transform. It's not about transferring something from the past and bringing it the same, copying something today, but it's about transforming it and taking it forward. Otherwise, we would have stayed in the cave all the time. So church is like a box as a response to the climate. Temple is like a spaces in between, again, as a response to the climate. And that's why when we did this, this temple, we started with this form, which reminds you of a temple. And then we started delayering that and bringing light within that, and started creating this entire form, which allows the nature as well. We have this combination of technology and faith. So you see this Audi and then you still have this puja happening in front, or you see this sadhu with this mobile there. So we have to balance these things. We have to balance between, we keep doing some of these very high-end research labs, and we have to follow Vastu for that. So there is this combination of balance between the technology and the faith. And there's nothing wrong in it. That's part of our culture. That's part of the way of upbringing. We have to create space for that, response to that. But you don't have to sort of, it's not a fossilized culture. We keep changing all the time. And it's about absorption. It's a culture of absorption. So you find the next generation much more confident, much more, they know exactly what they are talking about. So we develop our own language. English becomes English. Indian music, Indian classical music slowly becomes, Bollywood fusion. The food traditional becomes, Chinese and continental. We still wear jeans with kurtas. And then we have so many different religions and traditions happening in harmony. And when you see a picture like this, somebody wearing a Western clothing, Indian clothing, and then you don't find anything wrong in this, because this is a typical wedding picture in India. And you will see every kind of dress, and nothing looks odd as compared to any Western or even Japanese wedding, where everyone wears a very similar kind of thing. And that's the cultural absorption of different languages, different religions, different traditions, different clothings, everything, and still being one harmonious culture. So what we need is a self-confidence. We have to be confident about what we are doing and move forward.